everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jenny. I'm here today to share with you a little reading project that I've done over the last few months. It wasn't actually a planned project, it just kind of spontaneously came to me when I started reading the first memoir that I'm going to talk to you about. And then it just kind of came from there, and I thought it would be a fun project because I do make videos about adaptations. I find adaptations of books into other media, so whether that be TV or film, to be really interesting to compare and contrast. Because I think sometimes when you're a reader and you see that something was adapted that you're watching on screen, you're interested in knowing the source material. And so yeah, that's kind of where this project came from. And then I wanted to compare and contrast these three very popular memoirs that became films and talk about my impressions of them and how well the adaptations worked and how true they were to the source material, etc. So obviously these three memoirs were written by women. They are about transformation, some more than others. They are about travel and movement, and they are about, again, some more than others, kind of an introspection, a turning point in our lives and how that manifested. So the first one I'm going to talk about is, I'll talk about them in order of publication date, and it also just so happens that their films were subsequently published in that order as well. So we'll start with Under the Tuscan Sun, and the memoir was written by Frances Mays. And so this book is in a long tradition of Americans or Brits moving to a warm, older part of Europe and converting a home and making that home theirs and then integrating themselves into the culture. And so that's what this book is about. And it is very much the least introspective out of the three memoirs that we're going to talk about today. The book has recipes. The book has historical information about the little town that Frances Mays moves to with her partner, and they buy a home, and it just opens up from the bat of them moving to this town. I believe it's called Corsicana in Italy, in Tuscany, buying this home that had been not inhabited for quite a while, and beginning the renovations of it. And this was their plan the whole time. They aren't actually moving there permanently. They are renovating this home as a vacation home, and so they are there in the summers, and they are there on holidays, mostly I think Christmas, Thanksgiving type thing. And when Frances moves there, she moves there with her current partner, who is also, I believe they're both professors in San Francisco. And so they go together, and she has previously had a divorce. She has a child from that first marriage, who comes and visits her. But there is no relationship really in this book. There is no love story. There is no, amazing connection. And so the thing about this memoir that for me made me feel slightly less into it was that it's not very personally about Frances. You learn about some things about Frances's childhood, where she grew up in the southern United States. You learn about foods that she loves. You learn about kind of the process of buying the home and the travel back and forth and kind of the stressors and things, but you don't learn anything very personal about Frances herself. And I found that to be a bit lackluster for me. I wasn't as engaged with the story because I didn't really know her. And so when you contrast the memoir with the movie, with the film, which came out in 2003 and was directed and written by Audrey Wells. And there's also writing credit to Frances Mays, so I would assume that that means that Audrey Wells was consulting with Frances Mays when she was writing the story. It's a completely different story. So they keep, the name of the home, the name of the town, the name of the main character. They keep her profession, I believe, but I think she might be more of a writer than a professor. But she is, just going through a divorce. She is running away and trying to find a new life. It's very spontaneous. She just happens to be on a tour of Tuscany that friends of hers gifted her. A lesbian couple who were pregnant gifted her this tour. She goes on the tour. She finds this house. She decides to buy it on a whim. And then she has, the kind of funny escapades of fixing up an old house and all the horrible things that happen with that. And she makes friends with people in the village, and she becomes integrated into the culture of the village. They kept a few things like the 3 Polish workers who work on the house and who are part of the crew who do the renovations, but ultimately it's a romantic comedy. So the film becomes a romantic comedy with some lovely scenery and a couple different love interests for the main character. But ultimately, she has no daughter. She has, the actual life of this character is nothing like Frances Mays' life in the book, in the memoir. So I think that was done by design. They wanted this film to be a romantic comedy. Is it a heartwarming? Yes, it's a fun film. It does its thing. Certainly not a film that I personally love ultimately, but it is very lush, and you see the Tuscan countryside and, beautiful foods and lovely colors. And it's very evocative. And it actually has the relationship, and one of the characters in the relationship is Sandra Oh, who's a great actress. I think that was a nice addition to the story, even though that was not in any way part of the memoir. Perhaps Frances Mays does have a friend in that situation, but it was not part of the memoir at all. So that is Under the Tuscan Sun. So next we go to the worldwide phenomena that was Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert. I mean, this book was huge. It came out in 2010. It just overwhelmed the world with its perspective. And I listened to the book on audio, and so I was able to hear Elizabeth Gilbert herself narrate it, which I think enhanced the experience for me because there's a lot of humor in the book, and I liked being able to hear Elizabeth Gilbert's interpretation of some of the words. I think I got more out of it probably listening to her read it than I would have if I read it myself. She goes through a huge transformation in this book. She is very unhappy in her marriage and in her life and in her marriage. And then she blows that up. She leaves her husband, which causes a lot of difficulty for her. And she finds a partner, she finds a new boyfriend, and she kind of realizes that she is a woman who kind of jumps from relationship to relationship and changes herself based on who she's with. And she makes a lot of self-realizations, and she's also on a spiritual journey. And so she makes a decision to travel to kind of find herself. And part of the travel is that she gets an advance to write this book. So this book is the work that she is doing in her life is the book. So it's an interesting way to look at how you can take something that is she's going on this personal journey, but she's writing about it for everyone. And there's a lot of research in this book. She researches a lot about each of the 3 countries she's living in: Italy, India, and Bali. You learn a lot about those places. You learn a lot about like the origin of the Italian language, for example, because that's what she's studying when she's in Italy. She's really there to immerse herself in a language that she finds very beautiful. When she goes to India, she's there more for a spiritual journey. She's looking for a connection to God and her version of what God is. And she is also learns to live in a state of discomfort. She meets a lot of really influential people in her life that are also at these ashrams, the ashram she's at, who are also searching for a spiritual journey. And then in Bali, she's there as well to study with a guru, or perhaps he has a different term. I can't remember what his term is, what type of a man he is, but he's a spiritual leader in his community. And then while in Bali, she is able to really, take all the things that she was learning and integrating into her life from Italy and India and kind of tie that all up together into something that felt more whole for her as a whole person. And so while I wouldn't call this memoir perfect in any way, I do think that it had much more personal reflection, more substance, more of a journey that you can go on with the narrator than you can in Under the Tuscan Sun. And but again, this is a very different type of memoir. She's not going to like buy a house in a new country. She's working on internal things. So there's a lot more introspection included in that. And you obviously you have to kind of understand. I understand those subtleties in the differences between them. So when you're looking at the film, which came out in I'm sorry, I made a mistake. The Eat, Pray, Love memoir came out in 2006. The film came out in 2010. And it was directed by Ryan Murphy. Ryan Murphy is mostly a TV director, and not that I'm, putting that on a hierarchy in any way, just that the film is, again, a romantic comedy. That's what the film is. And so it changes the tone quite a bit, I would say. The film is not as deep as the book. It doesn't have the same resonance, I would say, in a lot of ways. It kind of dampens down the message a bit too much for me. I think the film could have had more depth to it and a bit more it was very beautiful. Julia Roberts is very beautiful, who plays the main character. The main plot points are very similar. They keep a lot of the most important characters in there. But for instance, when they're in India, there's a lot of interesting depth in that story. And that was just really lost in the film. I didn't feel that it came across in the same way. And also the relationship with Javier Bardem in Bali, the love part of the title, was very different from her relationship in the book. And I think that they could have maybe enhanced that a bit to make it feel more, I don't know. I just feel like they maybe missed the mark for me a little bit on, the essence of the book and how the book had the potential to portray, the layers that Elizabeth Gilbert experienced in the memoir. So I think the film is very entertaining and very lovely, and has again lovely scenes of the three countries that it is part of. But it was a bit too fluffy, I think, for me. Okay, and so the final memoir that I'm bringing up today is Wild by Cheryl and the book came out in 2012. And Wild and Eat, Pray, Love have more in common, I would say, than Under the Tuscan Sun. Under the Tuscan Sun is a little bit in its own category here because of the internal journeys that both of the narrators are going through in Eat, Pray, Love and Wild. There's a lot more, I think, that you can say about comparing and contrasting them in terms of the memoirs. The thing that is, I would say, better about Wild, the memoir, is that it has the chance to be more succinct. So because Cheryl Strayed wrote this book about a very specific, I believe it was it 4 or 5 months, maybe 6-month period in her life, it has a cohesion to it that makes it, I found, very readable and very easy to navigate through. She jumps time here in this. She goes through her childhood. She goes through her, not every single thing in her childhood, but she references back to her childhood, her mother, her schooling, her failed marriage, her jobs, her drug abuse, her struggle after the death of her mother are all talked about in here in relation to her walking this trail. So she's walking the Pacific Crest Trail. She's doing that because she feels like it's going to help her to coalesce her life, because her life has been spiraling out of control for 4 years since her mother died. And this book, to me, this was a reread. I had already read this book previously. I gave it 5 stars on a reread. I liked it more the second time I read it than I did the first. I think this book has actually one of the best opening chapters I've ever read in a book. And there is a level of sophistication in the way that this book is shared and in the humbleness of Cheryl Strayed's life, in her lack of, to me, like you can't look at this book and say, she's super privileged. And I mean, she had still a level of privilege in being able to save up money and then plan out her trip, but she goes through a lot of hardship. She doesn't have a ton of extra money. And granted, she is doing this out of choice. So her privilege is her choice in this case, that she gets to choose to walk this trail as opposed to, having other obligations that would keep her from doing something like that. And maybe there's a level of audacity and a level of bravado in her that she's able to do that. You can argue different points on that, but ultimately, I think that this is an amazing memoir of transformation, of healing, of self-awareness, and trying to improve one's circumstances through doing something hard. So, she wasn't going to, and I think Eat, Pray, Love also has some hard moments in it, such as, her meditation time was very challenging for her. So she's not going through easy things necessarily, but the physical aspect of the hike that Cheryl Strayed has to do is so palpable when you're reading the book. She's very good at describing it. And so in contrast, when you are watching the film, which came out in 2014 and was directed by Jean-Marc Vallée, who died a few years ago, is a wonderful young, he was younger to pass away, wonderful director who's done some other really wonderful films as well. And it was written by Nick Hornby, and Cheryl Strayed has a line as well. So I'm not sure how involved she was in writing the screenplay, but I felt that Nick Hornby did a really good job of taking the material from the memoir and making it into a really moving film. it has some moments of levity. It has some moments of that are hard to watch because the content in Wild is hard to get through. I think some people struggled with her drug abuse and her sex life. Those things were not deal breakers for me because I think they just were part of her life and she was sharing them. And I think everything that was portrayed in the film, like obviously you couldn't include every single encounter she had, every person she met on the trail, every situation that she wrote about, but they were very good at keeping the story true to the original message in the memoir while having to remove some of the situations and recontextualize some of the situations a little bit that she went through in order to get the point across without, making a 5-hour-long film, because we can't do that. So I think out of all of the films, my favorite was Wild. And out of all of the books, my favorite was Wild. So I just think that that's probably a personality thing for me. I tend to like films that are more on the drama side than on the rom-com side. And that's no shade to rom-coms. That's just like, I'm just a kind of more serious person, I would say. And I don't really want to... you couldn't have made this into a rom-com. It's just not possible. If you made this into a rom-com, I'm not sure. Like, I don't even think you could do it. It's just, the whole context would have had to be changed of this book. So it needed to be made into a more serious film. It was made into a more serious film. It's a very good film. It's got beautiful scenery. It's got good acting. I think it really connects you to the story in a way that if you didn't read the memoir and you just watched the film, I think you would still get the idea of what the book was trying to say. And you can't really say that about the other two films. Neither Under the Tuscan Sun nor Eat, Pray, Love really convey the depth. Eat, Pray, Love the film does not convey the depth of the book. There isn't a ton of depth in Under the Tuscan Sun, the memoir. It is more about a place and learning about it, history, geography, renovations. So maybe in that sense, making it into a rom-com was a way to take, a kind of scenario and make it into an entertaining film. They could have kept things more under the guise of the memoir, but I'm not sure what would have propelled through on the storyline. So it probably is good that they changed it so much. But I also think it's important to remember the time frame that these were done in between Under the Tuscan Sun, the film, and Wild, the film. There's a lot of change around women's stories and how they were being told, and those stories are still evolving today and changing today in terms of how films are made, how TV's made about women's stories. And so I think this is actually, they're really an interesting evolution of Eat, Pray, Love, the film, being right in the middle and kind of being this transition point between turning a women's story into a rom-com because women watch rom-coms and that's how we tell their stories, to a woman's personal journey of transformation without any need to really have a satisfying love relationship at all, because there isn't one in the film. That's kind of interesting too. And I only just thought of that right now as I was talking to you. So those are the 3 memoirs and the 3 films. Please let me know if you've watched, read any of these, and what you think of them in relation to the evolution of women's storytelling in film and in memoir. And I want to thank you so much for watching, and I will be back again soon with another video.